Hello and welcome to the Bible study. My name is Kent Philpott. I'm pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley, California. That's in Marin County, just across the bridge from San Francisco. And we are here at Marin TV in San Rafael, A Street. And we've been here for the very beginning when Marin TV opened up. It's just a pleasure to be here in the studio and be able to make these presentations. We are just 3 programs away from concluding with the Gospel of Mark. The Mark was the first written gospel of the 4: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It was written actually to a Gentile audience. We find that in many places. It's the shortest of the Gospels. And so we go through it verse by verse. We're in chapter 15. 17 verses beginning with verse 16. Mark 15:16. So here we go, and we're going to be covering 2 topics. One, Jesus is mocked, and then the crucifixion. Jesus is under arrest at this point. The power of Rome conspiring with some of the leadership there in Jerusalem, they have grabbed a hold of him. They arrested him in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so now he's going through a period of kind of a mock trial. So this is we're getting now to the very core of the work of Jesus. I have to say that while we're on the planet here, will never fully grasp what we're looking at. It becomes apparent to those of us who do verse-by-verse preaching that there's so much of it that is very difficult to comprehend. Our IQ level just isn't large enough to grasp all of it. So in this passage, we see how very dangerous and deadly sin is. Sin is the breaking of the law of God, which is quite comprehensive and is very interesting if you would break it down into categories, which I'm not going to take the time to do here, even if I had the intellectual capacity, which I don't. Anyway, but we're looking at this incredible story of the very last day of Jesus being alive here on the planet. So let's begin by looking at Mark chapter 15 and verse 16. And it's titled in the English Standard Version, which I use. There are many good versions. I used to believe that King James was the only version you could possibly use because it was the authorized version. Then somebody told me, well, it's authorized by King James in the 1600s. Oh, okay. So many good translations. You pick the one you like, and that's what we do. So this is titled in the English Standard Version, Jesus is mocked. They're making fun of him. They're attacking him verbally. So one of the things that is going on is the Roman soldiers, they played a game called the Game of the King. The Game of the King. They would pick one of their own, incredibly disastrous, pick one of their own. They'd say, you're the king, dress them up as a king, and then brutalize them. And then, after they tormented and beat him up, they killed him. That was a different day, the Roman soldiers. And there's a lot of speculation of why this went on, but I'm not going to get into it. So we're at verse 16. And the soldiers, these are Roman soldiers, because this is the time of Passover when the population of Jerusalem swells by 10, about 1 million people in there, and they're coming for this big celebration. And what happened is Pontius Pilate the Roman governor, has come down to Jerusalem, staying at the fortress of Antonia, built right up against in the northwestern part of the temple. And so you had the soldiers there. They were probably Syrian soldiers, Roman soldiers from Syria, so that they would speak the language, Aramaic. But so this is the situation. So the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the governor's headquarters. And so this is where Pontius Pilate is. This is the Antonia, again, fortress. Some parts of it, by the way, remain today. And it says, and they called together the whole battalion. It could be called a cohort, generally about 600 soldiers, Roman soldiers, likely not the full contingent, probably not space to stay at the fortress of Antonia. But anyway, there are the Roman soldiers. Verse 17. And they clothed him in a purple cloak. Now the color purple was expensive. Anything colored purple, it was the royal color. And so they clothed Jesus then in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him. Now, the crown of thorns, there were very prickly plants in Palestine. And so they kind of wove these together. It was another way of torture. Put it on, and it's just, it's going to be just terrible. So they put this phony crown on it to make fun of Jesus. Verse 18. And they began to salute him. Hail, King of the Jews. Wow. What a statement to make. They knew that Jesus was being accused by the Jewish leadership because he was claiming to be the king, or so they said, of the Jewish people. Now this is Jesus, a young man. He's probably about 32, 33 years old at this point. He's from Galilee. He hasn't been trained by the Sadducees or the Pharisees. He's untrained in terms of their traditions. And so that's what they're doing. They're making fun of him. They're embarrassing him and hoping to just attack him. Verse 18, and they began to salute him, Hail, King of the Jews. And verse 19, and they were striking his head with a reed, means a stick. Now, it was very likely that it was a fake symbol of power that they gave to him. This stick, we find it in other places. I'm not going to go into the details about the stick, but striking him with a reed or a stick and spitting on him and kneeling down in homage to him and mocking him. Oh, you're a big deal, are you? You, Jesus, that you're all alone. You don't have a gang. You don't have anybody supporting you. The little group that you got, they're all gone. I imagine there's all kinds of things that we're saying to him. So it says in verse 20, and when they had mocked him, probably, putting the stick in his hand, they stripped him of the purple cloak. Now you understand Jesus will be naked here. He didn't have undergarments like we have today. Didn't have that sort of thing. They stripped him of the purple cloak. In Matthew's account of this, he uses the word scarlet instead of purple. Marks purple here, probably because the purple color was fading and was beginning to look more reddish. So they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. And they led him out to crucify him. Well, what had been predicted now is being fulfilled. Jesus never complained. He never cried out. He knew that he was accomplishing the work the Father had given him. And you just have to think that Jesus had to be physically strong and able to endure what he did. Okay, now we go to the next section, which is called in the English Standard Version, the Crucifixion. The Crucifixion. The Jewish people didn't use a cross to hang somebody on, but the Romans did, because it was an excruciatingly awful way to die. They would put nails not through the hand, but through the wrist, put the feet on top, and a big nail right through both ankles. And there they were, and they were stripped naked. So there you are on this cross, and sometimes it took a long time to die. So here is the crucifixion. And it was used as a deterrent to warn people not to rebel against Rome. Horrible way to die. Okay, verse 21. And they compelled a passerby. Now, these are the Roman soldiers who were signed to carry out the execution. They compelled a passerby, probably coming in for Passover, Simon of Cyrene. Cyrene. This would be in Libya, North Africa, and they had there was a large Jewish population. They had a large population of these people in Jerusalem, and they actually the Cyrenians had their own synagogue in the city of Jerusalem. So he was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. Jesus had been really beaten up badly at this point, and we'd carry the cross beam. The main post would already be in place. That's always there. And they would bring the cross beam, and they had to carry it in. And so Jesus fell under the load, was not able to carry it, so they grabbed this guy. Notice Mark says the father of Alexander and Rufus. So these people, this became known to the church in Jerusalem there. And in Romans chapter 16, verse 13, Paul writes, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, also his mother." So Paul mentions this Rufus. So they have become identified with the church. Alexander they don't mention, but this Simon was the father of these two young men, and so Simon is carrying the cross. Verse 22. And they brought him to a place called Golgotha. Golgotha. That is an Aramaic term. The Greek equivalent would be cranium. We get a word cranium from it. And Jerome, the Vulgate, the Latin Vulgate, it is the word Calvary. And we know the word Calvary far more than we know Golgotha or cranium or place of the skull. And so this was the name of it, the place of the skull, the place of execution. And the Romans probably put this on one of the roads leading into Jerusalem. So there you'd have to be, everybody would be coming in now for Passover, and there would be seeing Jesus naked and bleeding on that cross. So then it says, verse 23, and they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. Now Matthew tells us that Jesus tasted it, probably spit it out, tasted it. Very interesting. And they were probably given. They were given by the women of Jerusalem. Jesus had a lot of ladies who followed him, and they had followed him all the way from Galilee. And it was something typical. But let me see, I have a reference to Proverbs 31:16. Oh yeah, here's Proverbs 31:16. By the way, everything that happened to Jesus had been prophesied, and this Proverbs, 1,000 years before, says, "Give strong drink to the one who is perishing, and wine to those in bitter distress." Interesting how that took place. Okay. So they offered it. Jesus, according to Matthew, tasted it, but he didn't drink it for whatever reason. We don't know. It's just something that they did. And so, verse 24, and they crucified him. Large nails, by the way. These kinds of nails have been found by archaeologists, and they were large. They weren't tiny little nails. They were big. And so they crucified him and divided his garments among them. Jesus probably had something on his head, had an inner garment, an outer garment, sandals. We don't know exactly what it was. And so that's what they did. They cast lots for it. And one of the passages that describe this is Psalm 22, verses 16 to 18. Again, this psalm is written, the Psalm of David, 1,000 years, mind you, 1,000 years prior. It says, Psalm 22:16, "For dogs encompassed me, a company of evildoers encircled me. They have pierced my hands and feet." Now this is at least 500 years written before the Romans started to use crucifixion as a means of execution. They pierced my hands and feet. And the word is pierced. The word went all the way through. It says, "I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots." Psalm 22:18. At least 1,000 years before the event took place here, and it perfectly describes it. I'm going to read some more verses from Psalms 22. I'm afraid I'll forget if I don't read it right now, so I'm going to give it to you. Psalm 22:6-8. "But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him." Again, the Psalm 22 of David, all those many hundreds of years before the actual event takes place. Man, I wonder what I would have done if I had heard this before I was a Christian and said, "Hey, come on, Philpott, what do you think about this?" I would have said, "I don't know what is going on here. There's got to be some kind of false stuff added in here." Totally impossible, because this stuff had been read for centuries down before the events had taken place in many different kind of languages, by the way. So they cast lots for his garments to decide what each should take. Wow. It says, "And it was the third hour when they crucified him," the third hour. That would have been at 9 a.m. in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. the third hour. That's the way the Jewish people numbered things. The Romans did it a little different. In John's gospel, he says the 6th hour. And for the Romans, it was the 6th hour. But for the Jewish people, it was the 9th hour. They had a different way of calculating time. So it was the third hour when they crucified him. Verse 26. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." I could go on a little bit. I don't think I'm going to. Pilate did this. This was a way of mocking the Jewish leadership. They mocked him. The King of the Jews. That would put a sign over on the top of the cross, on the vertical beam. It would be tacked there. And the reason for this person being killed, crucified, would be stated there. So Pilate, and he put it well, and Mark doesn't tell us, in 3 different languages. The King of the Jews. So Pilate did this. In other words, to say that Jesus deserved that. He was a political rebel. And so, but the people would have hated that, what he said. And so Pilate did that to mock and cause dissatisfaction amongst those people. Now, verse 28. It does not appear in the Gospel of Mark. We find it in Luke chapter 22, verse 37. I'm going to read it to you, but it does not find itself in the Gospel of Mark for many hundreds of years. And that's why the ESV excludes it, although it is authentic because it's also in Luke 22:37, which says, "For I tell you that this scripture must be fulfilled in me, and he was numbered with the transgressions. For what is written about him has its fulfillment, being reckoned with the transgressors." Wow. So we're going to verse 27 now. And then, of course, verse 28. "And with him they crucified 2 robbers, one on his right and one on his left." They were probably revolutionaries. It says robbers here, but the term can be looked at in different ways. So 2 robbers. We know that one of them actually believed in Jesus while he was there, and Jesus said to him, "This day you will be with me in paradise." We run into the chronos versus kairos. Chronos is linear time. Kairos is God's time. God exists outside of time. We have no concept, we'll never figure out of this about God. God is so much bigger than we can ever imagine. I doubt in heaven we'll have the capacity to see it all. I mean, the God of the universe who created in a moment everything that is, every atom. Just astonishing. But anyway, so one on the right, one on the left. Isaiah 53:12 says, "He was numbered with the transgressors." Isaiah 53. He was numbered with the transgressors 750 to 780 years before the event. Verse 29. "And those who passed by derided him." It's on the road coming into Jerusalem, all these people coming in. And it says, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days." Jesus had made a statement very early, very close to this time. He said, "Destroy the temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days," over a course of 3 days. Okay. He wasn't talking about the temple. He was talking about himself. But they misunderstood. They misunderstood. He would die, but he would be raised. Jesus knew that. Aha, you who would destroy the temple. They didn't get it. He says, "Save yourself and come down from the cross." Now, I have an idea there was some mixed people there, some who thought, oh, he's just a phony, make fun of him. But maybe there was some who said, well, we've seen who he is. We've seen all the stuff that he has done, the miracles, the healings, casting out of demons, raising the dead, opening eyes, cleansing lepers. Yet they could not believe. They could not believe. You know, faith is a gift. Faith is a gift. Many people go for a long time and they can't believe. Faith is something that is given to us. We actually don't have the capacity. It is a gift of God. Anyway, so the chief priests, the leaders, and the scribes, those are the lawyers. They could have been Pharisees and so on. They're the power people. The chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, he saved others. He cannot save himself. Well, of course, they were blind as to what the Scripture said. Replete over and over again, so many times in the Hebrew Bible, that the Christ, the Messiah, would come and die and take the sins of the people upon himself. But they couldn't grasp it. How could this be? Beyond their capacity to really grasp. I remember hearing about this before I was a Christian, when I became a Christian at age 21, and none of it made any sense to me. Made no sense to me. Yeah, just your story, just your religious fanatics with your story. Until one day, bam, God opened my eyes and allowed me to see and saved me. He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross that we may see and believe. He didn't recognize that the sins, all of our sin would be placed upon Jesus at the cross. There was the reason why he was doing that. To save us, he had to die and take our sin upon himself. And it says, those who were crucified with him also reviled him. And of course we find later on that one of them actually believed in Jesus and became a follower. Psalm 22, 7 to 8. All who see me mock me. They make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Wow. So, Jesus was born to live and to take our sin upon himself. Nothing a sinful man can do can bring salvation. I don't care how good we are. We cannot save ourselves. No church can save us. Our good deeds can't save us. Our right religion can't save us. Only the person and the work of Jesus Christ. So long.